Tennessee v. Scopes, a court case that occurred in Dayton, Tennessee in 1925, is perhaps the single most culturally significant case in American history, as it affected science, religion, and education throughout the nation. But before we can look at the impact of the Scopes trial, we have to go back to the law that started it all. John Washington Butler enacted the Butler Act on January 21, 1925. This legislation prohibited teachers of all Tennessee public schools and universities from teaching the scientific theory of evolution. Little did Mr. Butler know this law would cause a huge uproar all over the state, particularly in tiny Dayton, Tennessee. John Scopes is a biology teacher at Ray County High School. After the Butler Law was enacted, the ACLU, or the American Civil Liberties Union, a citizens' rights group, contacted Scopes and begged him to teach evolution in the classroom. Scopes accepted the group's request and exposed his class to On the Origin of Species, an evolutionary text. Law enforcement was notified of Scopes' curriculum and he was arrested. Thus began the trial of John Scopes. Clarence Darrow represented Scopes, while A.T. Stewart led the prosecution with the assistance of Mr. William Jennings Bryan, a famous orator with creationist views. The trial began on July 10, 1925 with the selection of the jury. 3 days later, Clarence Darrow delivered a passionate speech stating that we find today as brazen and as bold an attempt to destroy learning as was ever made in the Middle Ages. Over the next 10 days, the lawyers called biblical specialists, students, and zoologists to testify. Finally, on July 21, 1925, the jury returned its guilty verdict after only 9 minutes of deliberation. Scopes was fined $100, and after hearing this verdict, John Scopes made his only statement of the trial. I plan to oppose this law in any way that I can. Any other action would be in violation of my ideal of academic freedom. The Scopes monkey trial had a huge impact upon Tennessee's history and perception of intellectual freedom. Although Scopes was found guilty, the trial shed light upon academic censorship. It also frightened many radical creationists who were alarmed by the support that Scopes had received. Furthermore, textbook publishers began to subtly mention evolution in their books. John Scopes does an excellent job of summing up the results in his reflections of the trial 40 years after it occurred. He says that the trial marked a beginning of the development of a national consciousness of the roles played by religion, science, and education. But most importantly, I feel that restrictive legislation on academic freedom is forever a thing of the past.